So yeah, welcome to my lunch and learn. I'll be giving you guys that the guys that are mainly not part of the Meerkat team, because I think the Meerkat guys are much familiar with the talk of the lunch and learn that I'm about to present. So basically, we've done some recent work, which is a DevOps work myself and Paul, on managing Jenkins as code. So that includes the Jenkins configuration as well as the Jenkins jobs as code. So one my wonder or ask, I think for people that were here when Seth was still around, there were some tickets that were reported or Seth wanted to do that focused on this type of work. If I remember correctly, there was a ticket that was under his name that he wanted to store Jenkins jobs as code, sorry, so that whenever we have an occurrence, a bad occurrence of maybe our Jenkins gets destroyed or is down, we could simply spin up a Jenkins instance from one source and as well as the jobs that accompany it. So this talk, as I mentioned in the previous slide, that one person might wonder, why did we decide to do this work, Paul and myself? So oftenly enough, we hear people saying that, okay, I wanted to test something on CI and I couldn't test a couple of things on CI because Jenkins was broken, or maybe there was a plugin that was upgraded that broke our current CI, or the work that we did some time back, whereby we moved certain credentials from version control to use GitHub Jenkins credentials. I remember that work broke some of the jobs that we had, and there was a lot of downtime and people had to not do their work normally. So in order for us to avoid such things, we decided, you know what, maybe we should have a separate Jenkins development environment whereby someone that is new to Jenkins and they want to test or break stuff, they could hop onto this development environment and break as much as they want, but at the same time, not hindering other people from doing their own work. So how this started, it started being a couple of tickets. As I mentioned, the creating a separate development environment was I think was the first one that we did. And then from there, we saw that, okay, we are able to create the development CI, but we are not just satisfied with that, because after we did the development CI, we saw that the jobs or the pipelines that we have in our production CI were not there in the development CI. So what we needed to do now was the configuration of those jobs. We needed them to be applied in the new CI. So that's So that's where some of the work started with the as code paradigm. So at first it was just purely creating a development CI. We didn't care about storing the configuration to be as code or having the jobs as code. So that's where from creating the development CI, that's where I decided, know what, okay, let's continue with this work and explore the as code paradigm. So what we've done so far, we're able to create the jobs and store them in version control as code, as well as the Jenkins configuration as code. So you might ask, what is the difference between the jobs and the configuration itself? So the jobs is the pipeline that you see for the different branches whenever you log into Jenkins. And the configuration purely is focused on the Jenkins setup. That is how you actually configure your Jenkins CI system. So another work we did on this was to migrate the secrets that were stored in version control, which was GitHub, to no longer use GitHub for secrets, but use an internal Jenkins plugin, which is the Jenkins credential. So that's how this manage as code Jenkins as code paradigm started. So the overview of this talk, I'm just going to walk you through managing Jenkins as code, which is the infrastructure as code, the configuration as code, and the job as code. I'm going to walk you through how to build a Jenkins environment from a single source or instance. And also, whenever you've built that Jenkins environment, which pretty much comes out of the box having nothing, no jobs defined into it. So I'm going to show you how we apply or add the jobs that we currently have for our production CI with just using a single command to apply those jobs to the freshly deployed different CI. And then this will be included in the demo whereby I show you how I don't want to take all the credit of this work because it was a team effort. So how we deployed the separate Jenkins instance, which is the development environment, to a Docker container. So I'll be using a Docker container to deploy the separate Jenkins instance, but it will be ran, the commands will be ran from my local machine. So meaning that anyone in the team can do that in their own spare time, but also there are some key components that you need to take into account because if you're not much clued up on what to do, on which commands to run, the requirements that are needed for each and every command that you need to run when building these instances, you might end up affecting the CI that we have. That CI that we have currently running on production, which is the CI that everyone can use. And then the last but not least slide will be the benefits of this as code paradigm, because I'll just list a few benefits that personally I have obtained from this work that I've done with people. So yeah. So the managing Jenkins as code has specific requirements. So this is only focused on what Chem has. For someone else, they might deploy their Jenkins instance or use different plugins to accomplish this as code paradigm. So currently, we all know that we deploy our Jenkins instances on Docker containers, and we use Ansible as the automation tool to automate the scripts that we use to write the scripts that we use to deploy Jenkins, and we use Python to deploy the Jenkins jobs that we have. That the Jenkins jobs, Python goes in hand with the Jenkins jobs builder that we use to deploy the different Jenkins jobs. So the two main plugins that we used for this work was to use the Jenkins configuration as code plugin and use the Jenkins job builder. So the Jenkins configuration as code plugin is not supported for the earlier versions of Jenkins. So if currently one would go and check the version that we're currently running on our production CI, they would see that it's pretty much an outdated version, which poses security risks. As such, if our current, or before we did this work, if our current CI was to go down, and it was to go down, that would have a negative impact because the downtime or the time that would be taken to investigate the cause and the issue would have a negative impact on the developers themselves. But with the Jenkins as code plugin, since we have a configuration that will be easily installed, easily stored on version control, and the configuration is easily we can easily get it. I'll show you later on in the presentation. The configuration file, you can easily download it from the Jenkins instance that you're currently running and store it somewhere offsite. So what that will have, it will have all the environment set up for your Jenkins instance. So that includes the credentials you have, the security that the Jenkins instance is using, even going down to as what type of communication platforms you use. I know previously we used Slack and we changed from Slack to MetaMask. So all of that configuration will be included in the downloadable Jenkins config file. And then the Jenkins Job Builder plugin, it's split into two. So you have the configuration file, which is a separate file, and then you have files which have job definitions. So the configuration file is for the job builder is mainly focused on the builder configuration, which consists of job settings as well as job plugin dependencies, because there are some jobs that are dependent on certain plugins, and then there are some jobs that do not require certain plugins. So the configuration file, it consists of the settings for all the jobs that will be included all the jobs that will be included in the Jenkins instance. And then the job definitions for each individual jobs that we see on the production CI, they have their own separate YAML files which define the individual config for that particular job. So as I said previously, that we use Ansible, Docker, as well as Python to manage our infrastructure. So before, it was only a certain subsection that we only had in our GitHub, which was version control, which was the Docker files, as well as the Ansible playbooks. So when we introduced the job builder, that's when we started having Python as included in the infrastructure setup. And then, so how previously we used to configure Jenkins was you used to go to the Jenkins instance that was running on CI, and then you had to manually click on the GUI that you needed certain settings that you could that you needed for a Jenkins instance. So now imagine that you are not able to access the CI. How would you configure your Jenkins instance? So that's where the configuration as code plugin. So once this as code plugin is installed, you are able to get a configuration file that is in YAML syntax that will include all of the configuration that you see when you configure the system from the GUI. So that includes, as I mentioned, that includes your security, your credentials, and so on and so forth. But on that, one person might ask, why would we want to store our credentials on version control? So how the plugin works, all of the secrets that are defined under the credentials plugin will be encrypted, so that whenever you maybe store this on version control on GitHub or something, it would not have the password as clear text, but it would have the credentials, as encrypted. So how this looks like, we went from having to manually click on the GUI to configure Jenkins to only having a single file, configuration file, that could be stored anywhere and could be applied to any other Jenkins instance. I will show you later on when I deploy our CI dev how this file actually looks like out of the box, and how it could be added from the stuff that we added from a previous Jenkins instance. So that is basically the same as the Jenkins job as code. So previously, when you wanted a particular job or a pipeline to be run on Jenkins, you have to manually go into the GUI and add all of the job configuration by clicking in the GUI options that you have in the Jenkins GUI. But now, we're moving from being able to click the settings from the GUI to having a single configuration file that you could use to define your jobs as well. So I won't dwell deep into the elements that these two different files have, because you have the configuration file, which houses the environmental settings, and then you have the job description files, which have configuration elements for individual jobs. So I will just quickly show you how one would deploy a Jenkins instance from a single source. So let me just swap around to my terminal. This is where the part of the demo begins. So if I just quickly go to ci.dev, we will see that we are not able to connect to ci.dev because I haven't deployed the Jenkins. I haven't deployed the Jenkins instance that runs on this particular URL. So first and foremost, if you're interested in doing this yourself, there's a nice README that Lupo included in the CatTrap repository. So what we need to do, we need to, first and foremost, we need to export credentials, which is, I think it's Docker Hub credentials, Jenkins credentials, and so on and so forth. So I've already done that. I'll just, from the ease of use, as I mentioned, that you can deploy this using a single command, which is from the README, you will see what the individual targets do. They are nicely explained in the documents in CatTrap. So if I just run make Jenkins dev, so what this will do, it will connect to the host that, okay, this is wrong. What this will do, it will connect to the host that our Jenkins container will be deployed in, which is camp02. So I've already, if I do Docker PS on camp02, we'll see that there is no container that is currently running. So just give this a few minutes to deploy, and then we'll check if we are able to access using the URL I showed earlier on to access the Jenkins instance. So whilst we're still waiting for this to spin up the instance, if anyone has a question at this point in time, you may ask whilst we're waiting for this.
Maybe just to throw one day. I see you executed that make Jenkins, but now it's printing out some funny stuff. Well, what's actually happening in the background? Because I see there's various tasks in place and whatnot.
So how we structured this, when you make the Jenkins, when you run that make Jenkins dev, it runs Ansible playbooks that have different roles into it. So if I just explain maybe the simple task that is here in the beginning, which is verifying that the environmental variables have been provided. So this is included in one of the Ansible playbooks we have in CatTrap. In an event that a user tries and run that make Jenkins without having exported or defined this environmental variable, this playbook will not proceed and deploy your Jenkins instance. So in short, all of the tasks that you see here are defined in playbooks that are housed in CatTrap. So that is how CatTrap fits into this. Well, that is how, from my understanding, CatTrap fits into the spectrum of managing Jenkins as code. And as I explained previously in the previous slides, that the infrastructure is based on three tools, which is Ansible, Docker, as well as Python. So the Ansible part of the infrastructure setup is having these playbooks that will automate the deployment of Jenkins. I don't know whether you answered before.
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so you see that for this particular task, which is ensuring that the Docker group exists, we're ignoring it, or we're having this particular error in this instance because we already defined a Docker group. So it will ignore it and proceed, but it won't fail our particular deployment. So you will just see once it's done, just give it a couple of minutes, you will see that we will be able to access our Docker instance, even though there was a particular error like that one, which is not, it's not that, it won't pose a problem or a challenge in essence. Okay, let's just give it a couple of minutes. So another thing that you might want to take into note when running, because the spinning up or deploying the Jenkins instance, as well as applying the relevant jobs that we see in our production CI, those are two separate tasks. So for this particular task, it would need you to be in a certain directory for you to spin up or deploy. If you're running it locally, of course, it would need you to be, even if it, if you're running it locally, it would need you to be in a certain directory, because you can't execute that make command without being in this directory. So we see that it has successfully, let's just check if it has successfully deployed our Jenkins instance. Okay. Cool. So for after installing the first or the welcome page that you will see is this login page, whereby I think we did send out an email saying that we have moved from authentication via GitHub to using our LDAP credentials to access Jenkins. I don't know whether we have exercised that so far, but in essence, we're no longer using the GitHub authentication. We're using our LDAP credentials. So when I sign in here, one might expect that we would see a similar system to the one we have on our production CI, whereby we have all of these jobs and they're different, or they are parental views, which is continuous delivery, AQA of multiple branches, and so on and so forth, would contain all of the jobs that we have in our production CI. But that is not the case, because this newly installed, this newly deployed Jenkins instance is a fresh out of the box instance. What it only contains, it contains a configuration that is specific to the environment that we see in front of my screen. So that's where the Jenkins job builder plugin comes into play. So what we wanted to do was that all of the jobs that are defined in the production CI, as we see them here, we wanted, whenever the user wanted to test something on the development CI, taking into account that they do not want to affect other users by breaking stuff on the production CI. What we wanted to do was that all of the jobs that are here, they should also be included in our development CI. As much as after I deploy or update the jobs as per the job builder requirements, as much as the history of individual jobs won't be there, which is in this work is our next task, which is actually if you've deployed the Jenkins instance and then now you have applied the jobs that you have on the production CI, you also want to have the history of the individual jobs, which is it's in the to-do of this work that we're doing with Info. So what I will do now, I will try and update the Jenkins jobs to be included in this production CI. But first and foremost, one of the requirements that you need to do as a user that deploys this environment, you need to, as part of the requirements and credentials that are needed, you need to have a token that will be used when applying or building the Jenkins jobs. So I'll quickly generate a token for my user. So if you go to people, we'll see that there's only one user, which is Anele Makhaba, was defined because this is a new and a fresh fresh deployment of this particular Jenkins instance. So let me just quickly generate a token for this. And then I will deploy, or I will add I'll add the jobs. So as you can, I don't know whether you can see my screen in the folder I'm in.
You can slightly increase the font, please.
Okay. Okay, this should be fine. Okay, so for this particular deployment or build instance, which is applying the Jenkins job, I don't need to be under this folder. The folder that I need to be under is the Jenkins folder, which contains the individual jobs configuration. So if I ls here, you'll see that there's jobs as code, then there's the actual jobs. In this folder, which is jobs, it contains all of the job configurations that you see in the CI development environment. And then this jobs as code will contain the setup that you need for these jobs in order for them to be applied in the new instance of CI dev. So I need to move and go under the jobs as code directory. So what I need to do here, I can list the jobs I have, the list of jobs that I have. I can update the jobs that I have to be included in the new Jenkins instance, and I can, according to documents, I can do a whole lot of other things. But for now, I'm only interested in applying the individual jobs that we see in production CI to our development CI. So what I need to export my credential that I just created now. No. Copy this. Okay. And then in order for me to apply the jobs or update, in order for me to, I wouldn't say migrate, but have the jobs that we have in production CI to the development CI, I need to make update, which will actually apply the individual jobs that we have on the production CI. So now if I go back to the development CI, I will see that we now have a list of all the jobs that we have in our production CI, right? So when you go under a specific job, let's say this HUF pipeline, you would see that there is no build history, as opposed to if maybe you go to this HUF pipeline on the production CI, which has a build history of the previous builds. So currently, the work that needs to be done for this is to be able to apply the backup from, I think they are stored in a particular box here, a camp box. The backup, you need to apply that backup from that particular box to this new Jenkins instance. So that concludes my demo. I'll just try and finish up the rest of the slide I have. So as I mentioned, out of the box CI environment does not include fully configured jobs. And we saw that from the demo that I did previously. When you do make updates all the Jenkins jobs that you see in production CI to the development CI. So I'll just quickly jump because the next slide is the demo that I've just went through. So the demo, well, it outlines what I did basically, which is deploy a new Jenkins instance, update or add all of the Jenkins jobs that we have on the CI, and also outlines the specific repositories or folders that you need to be under in order to run these different commands. So what needs to be done as a to-do is that after deploying all of the jobs and the new Jenkins instance, we need to have the Jenkins build history for the individual jobs, so that there's still a work in progress that I'm currently busy with. So if I just quickly show you, as I mentioned, that you can download the configuration you can download the Jenkins configuration using that Jenkins as code plugin. So I'll quickly show you what the configuration looks like it is in YAML syntax. So basically, this is what it looks like. So you have your credentials, all of the credentials, you have certain protocols, access strategies, Docker settings, and so on and so forth. So this is all of the stuff that when you configure Jenkins using this manage, just a second. When you configure Jenkins using this configure system page, so all of the stuff that you saw in the configuration file is the stuff that has been configured using this configure system page. So yeah, that's that for the configuration file. So yeah, the benefits of this so far for me is that it's traceable, that whenever someone needs to make a change or configure the system, they would easily configure the system, maybe using the GUI setup, but the configuration file would be updated, and that those updates can be stored on version control. As we saw, this took us less than 10 minutes to deploy a new Jenkins instance and apply new jobs. So in an event that our Jenkins is down, it wouldn't take us much time to, not investigate, but to configure a new Jenkins instance and start using it, because we already have the configuration in place. We already have the jobs configuration in place. We can just simply apply those two, and then we have a new, freshly working Jenkins instance. It's easy to use. It's easy to deploy. As you just see, it's just 2 commands that I ran. And as much as there are, well, some things that are happening in the background, but it's just 2 simple commands that you run in order to spin up the Jenkins instance. And we saw it was fully working after that. Except for the part that we can't see previous jobs, of course, which is still in the pipeline, in the process of being done. And apart from that, the major one, as you can see, it's big and in bold in front of us, is that all of the configurations, which is from the environment settings to the job configuration to the individual jobs setup, all of that stuff is being stored in version control, which make it easy for us to make changes and apply those configurations as and apply those configurations to a newly deployed Jenkins instance. So without wasting further much time, that concludes my Lunch and Learn presentation. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to give a special thanks to Mpo for introducing me to all of this stuff. So I'll gladly take questions now. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation, Anele, and also for your work on that report. All right. Any other questions from anybody before we wrap up? All good, Tafik?
Yeah, thanks, Anele and Paul, for this talk and the work. I had a question. Sorry, I was a bit late. I was just sorting out some issues I had with IT. But I might have missed this thing, and I think you did mention now at the end. So you can export, if you edit the job in the GUI, you can export that to YAML.
Yes, that is as far as I'm concerned, that is for the environmental setup. You can do that. Pretty much, I'm not sure whether you can export it in the GUI for the individual jobs themselves, but I'm not sure. I just need to verify. But for the environmental setup, which is configuring the system, you can configure the system, make changes on the GUI, and then export that particular configuration file to later on apply it in future developments.
Okay, well, the question is, I'm just a bit confused with how do you manage change going forward? Do you manage change Of course, you want to do it via the configuration file, which is way better and versioning and Git. So if you make changes now, do you make it in the YAML first, or do you make it in the GUI? Like if specific changes, like let's say you want to introduce something new to Jenkins. Yeah.
Like let's say a new plugin or something.
Yeah,
So,
a new plugin and new other stuff. I don't know, maybe you want to change from using GitHub to GitLab.
okay. So what we did when we were doing this work, we made changes. We configured the system using the GUI, right? So what the GUI will do, well, the plugin, it will do, the configuration is called plugin. It will generate the YAML syntax of that change that you just made on the GUI. So let's just you click and say, okay, I no longer want to use the GitHub authentication. I want to use LDAP authentication with certain parameters. After you've clicked and applied those changes in the GUI, the configuration file, which is in YAML, will generate that particular section for you, which you can be able and copy it over to the configuration file we have in GitHub. So that is the chain of how we did it. How we did it. I think it's relatively easier that way, instead of you cracking your head and thinking what particular element you need to include in the configuration file in order to change something. So that's how we did it. Okay, I think Suleiman is a hand.
Yep, go ahead, Suleiman.
Hi, Anele. Well done. Very informative presentation. A very good topic also. I think we all have touched Jenkins at some point, and so it's a very keen topic. My question is, you mentioned during the beginning of your presentation that our production version of Jenkins is very old. And you're obviously using a nice shiny new version in your demo for the dev environment. Is there any plan to upgrade the production version to a more later version so that we can get all of the nice features that the new versions have?
Yes, I think the ultimate goal for this work was that if we can be able to have a mimicked version of the environment we have running on production, having all the jobs, all the configuration in place, the job history and everything, we'll then later on decommission the Jenkins version we currently have running on production and have this new version and apply the new version and safely apply all of the configuration and job history and everything. So once we are able and confident that the Jenkins environmental setup, as well as jobs and individual plugins that we have in the previous version of Jenkins, is installable and easily deployed from this mini demo that I was doing, is easily deployed and we won't break anything, then we'll decommission the old version of Jenkins we have currently running on production.
Cool, sounds good.
Yes, cool, thanks. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think if we have no further questions, that concludes this lunch and learn. Thank you for joining in.
All right, thanks a lot, Anele. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, Makhaba.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Anele. Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, Makhaba.